right. I think we're ready to kick it off. So thank you everybody for joining. I have the top of the hour. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. My name is Kathi Enderes, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, and then we'll jump right in. So just wanted to let you know this call or this webinar is going to be recorded, so I will make the recording available afterwards. If you have any questions during the conversation that we'll have or during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A panel on the top of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the end. And those that we don't get to, we'll answer afterwards via email. So with that, let's jump right in. And this webinar is hosted by our friends and colleagues at Charter. And joining me today is Julie DeBuhr. So we'll jump right in and do a little bit of introduction, if you can all see my screen. So we'll keep going here. So Kathi Enderes, I'm the Senior Vice President of Research at the Josh Bersin Company. My background is both in management consulting for about 10 years with PwC and EY and IBM and Deloitte. I've covered most of the big consulting companies, as well as a talent leader in large organizations, McKesson and Kaiser Permanente. And for the last few years, I've worked in research in all the areas of learning and people analytics and talent and all of those kind of topics in HR. And I work with Josh Bersin, if you know him. We are an HR research and advisory company focused on making work better. So that's me. And my accent is from Austria, if you're trying to guess it. So that's a little bit about me. Julie, over to you. You want to give us a little introduction?
You bet. Thanks, Kathi. Hello, everyone. I am Julie DeBuhr. I am currently serving as the head of employee experience at 1Password. I came to 1Password through, prior to that was at Envision, and prior to that was at New Relic. And then had spent my career before that at places like Nike and Pier 1 in the retail and HR space. So I come with I think a very interesting and non-traditional path into HR that has served me really well as being both an operator and an HR professional. So I like being able to bring that perspective to work. I have the pleasure of supporting the business partner team, as well as diversity and inclusion, learning and development, and our programs function. And so working together to really provide an amazing experience for the folks at 1Password. And if you don't know, 1Password is a secret management. We're a secret keeper, a security platform that helps keep your secrets, to help with your credentials, with your logins, so that you can safely and securely navigate the internet. And we take a really human-centric approach, not only to our product and to our consumers, but to our team as well at 1Password. And we lead with kindness and with just the utmost concern for folks. So I'm thrilled to be able to share a little bit about that experience, as well as talking about data with you all today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julie. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation in a little bit after I share just a little bit of backdrop on why we're talking about democratizing people data and why it's so important today, and how to do this using technology and processes to make people data more accessible and more digestible and more actionable. So let me jump right in. I'll cover a few slides, and then we'll have a conversation with Julie, and then we'd love to answer your questions as we get to them. So just a little bit of background. Why are we even talking about people data, and why are employee listening methods and employee data approaches are more important than today? Well, than ever. So I think no surprise to anybody, we're in a little bit of a downturn of the economy, of course, but at the same time, employees are still very much in the driver's seat. So understanding your employees, making sure that they have their productivity, the support, and the experience that they need is still very much on top of mind of CHROs, but then also CEOs as well, because the labor shortage is real. And it's a little bit of a different situation than we've ever had. Usually when the economy goes down, also unemployment goes basically up, or like the labor market gets easier to access. And that's not the case at all. still at this time, and I think I have the stats in here for June, but the ones for July or August are similar. More than 4 million people in the US are quitting every month voluntarily. So the quit rate is still very, very high. Employees are still looking for a great employee value proposition, a great experience, and an irresistible organization. And without data, of course, you can't tailor that and can't make that happen. Employees are also very stressed out, burned out. I think these statistics are kind of mind-boggling to me, that 81% of employees feel that they're at risk of burnout. And for HR people, by the way, it's even higher. It's over 90% of HR employees, because I think in HR and learning and leadership and people analytics, we've been in the hot seat for the last few years, and I don't think it's letting up, even as the pandemic might be letting up. Still very much people analytics, getting insights on your employees and helping them be their best selves and do their best work is still very much a priority for CHROs and CEOs. In terms of technology market has really shifted from this more transactionally oriented HR tech market, where we're thinking about just administrating transactions like hiring and performance management and engagement and well-being and benefits programs, to really enabling people to do their best work. So work tech is really where HR tech is going. I was just at the HR tech conference a couple of weeks ago, and many different vendors that are doing some really fascinating and interesting things in the HR tech market, because we're really thinking about doing HR tech and providing HR tech, not for HR people just, but for employees and managers to help with productivity and performance and everything. This is our view of how the HR tech market is really shaping up to be. So you see at the bottom, the kind of the transactional layer, where you have your HCM, your HR technology systems that are still very much needed, of course, to do payroll and recruiting and performance management and all of those kind of transactions. In the middle layer, you have intelligence. So intelligence on skills and job architecture and how people can move in the organization and where they might go with their career, and mentoring, matchings, and coaching, and all of those kind of intelligence areas that get fed from both the employee experience layer as well as the transactional layer of HR technology. And then at the top is really the most important layer. This is the layer where people can actually access all of this. And not just HR people, but employees can access dashboards, and we'll talk about how we see this with ChartHop in a little bit, but really building these access layers for employees and managers and everybody in the organization to really like get all these insights in the flow of work, not in a separate system. Data, of course, there's more and more data, and the growth of data has been mind-boggling. So I always hear that people analytics, maybe people data is not big data. I would disagree, because if you think about all the data points, even if you're not that big of a company, there's many different attributes, many different areas that describe your employees, and employees are complex, right? So the data that you have on your employees is very complex, and it's ever changing. It's changing every day and every minute, really. Some of these data points are changing every minute. So we really need to think about people analytics in a different way. And the transformation of people analytics has really shifted from more this transactional operational reporting to really doing these maybe forward-looking strategic analytics, to integrating analytics from different areas. And I'll talk in a little bit on how ChartHop can help with that, where you bring in different areas, not just from your people area, from your HCM or from your other people systems, from your sales system, from your customer service systems, how people are productive, where they are located, location, workplace analytics, really big right now too. Well-being, of course, who is working with whom, and then at the top of this, also adding in like outside data from labor market statistics, skills, trending skills, growing skills, declining skills, what job roles are really trending and going down, and what career pathways you can build. So really lots and lots of different areas that are coming into the people analytics area to shape this analytics kind of approach. And the customers who are consuming your people analytics have actually shifted a lot too, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, because it used to be that people analytics was for HR. Now people analytics is for everybody, right? What does your employees need to know? What do your managers need to know? What does finance need to know, and marketing? And we'll hear some great stories from Julie on how you've done that in your company. And of course, everything in HR is now connected. It used to be that maybe you could run HR in these silos where you had your recruiting team, you had your learning team, you had your rewards team, you had your people analytics team. But now all of these areas have to be interconnected. Diversity and inclusion is kind of part of everything. For example, people analytics goes across all of that, because in a way you need to find these insights and share them across all of these different COEs to make change happen and to make work better and help people be more productive. So that's where we come to the concept of democratizing people data. And what we mean by democratizing people data, I had a conversation with Julie when we talked about this, and she says, I don't really know what this means. So what we mean by democratizing is really giving more people access, democratizing people data with security, of course, with the right access levels to managers across the organizations, to leaders in the organization, but then also to every employee. What does every employee need to know about other employees, and what should they know? For example, they might want to know what team somebody works on, what skills they have, what experience they have, where they came from. What you heard from Julie and me, where we came from our professional experience. It's always helpful when you start working with somebody, for example, to know what's their background, what's their experience, where have they worked, do they want to work, where they're located. And by the way, I didn't share with you where I'm located. I'm located in Palo Alto, California. And that's always helpful too, right? Because then you know what time it is and what's their background and what's their like work environment like. When you think about weather, for example, what's the weather like when you're here where somebody lives, you know, how cold it is, how warm it is, and what team they belong to, of course, who's the manager, who are their teammates. All of those areas go with democratizing people data. And why is it such a hard thing? Why is democratizing people data so hard? Well, there's so many different systems that employees access today. If you think about this chart, and we only have a small subset of all the access systems that employees access in your workday. If you think about your own organization, it's probably, I read a statistic from Okta, who is a access management company, I think, that said, I think the large organization has about over 80 employee systems that employees use with them. That's a lot of systems, right? So that contains a lot of data on your employees. And how do you bring all of this to employees, to managers, to HR, to finance in a way that's easy and digestible and drives action? So that's really what we wanted to talk about today. And listening to employees, of course, is another source of input. So how can you get your voice of your employees in there? How do you listen actively, like asking people questions on your surveys? But then also, how do you crowdsource insight? How you get feedback, and how you tap into like maybe social media channels, and understand who is working with whom, who is communicating with whom. All of those insights are actually people data insights that we need to bring to employees and to managers in a way that's digestible and that they can use for shaping the employee experience and making employees happier and helping them do their best work. And when we studied employee experience, this is a pretty significant framework that we came up with. I'm not going to be able to share all of this, but just the high level insights on how we think about employee experience and what employees experience in your company. Employees really experience everything in your company, from the work that they do, who they work with, are they in small, agile, supportive teams, how their manager communicates with them, what goals they give them, how much they give them feedback, what's the physical, the digital, and the cultural workplace inclusion and the belonging factors in that too. How healthy are they? How can you help them be physically healthy, mentally healthy, and financially healthy as well? How can they grow in the company? How can they learn and develop? How can they build their career in different paths? And how much do they trust the organization? How do they trust their leaders? Do they feel inspired what the company does as a business? we heard from Julie what they do as a business and why care and security is so key to that, and helping people tie their work to that is kind of very important and not that easy to do sometimes. And then, of course, technology and services are part of that too. And the way to read this chart, I could talk about that chart alone for an hour, but I won't because we need to move on. But the way to read this chart is it's a heat map. So the things that are most impactful to outcomes, to business outcomes, people outcomes, innovation outcomes are darkest in color. So you see this trust in the organization really lit up. And what this resonates with is also what Julie shared with us. Do people actually trust the company? And trust has to do with also security, right? Do people feel like you keep your data safe? Do you listen to them, but then you use the data in a way that's respectful of their voice and respectful of their security? All of that figures into trust in the organization. And that's why democratizing people data is actually very, very important to all of those areas as well. And it really matters too, by the way, because when you use these employee experience practices, you have better financial performance. Your customers are happy. Maybe not surprising, but your customers are a lot happier if your employees have the right employee experience support systems and listening mechanisms as well. And of course, employees feel it's a better place to work and they are more engaged and you can retain them more. We just talked about how hard it is to retain people, but then also companies innovate a lot better. So data is at the core of all of this, because in a way, the heat map that I just showed you, every single one of these little rectangles, the dimensions of employee experience, actually have a data component, right? How do you know if people are financially secure, for example, if you provide them with well-being support that they need? All of these areas are measurable, but then how do you help managers and the organizations and employees take action on that? Because it can get very, very complex. And when we studied employee experience, we also correlated what practices, what technology practices actually correlate with higher maturity levels of employee experience. And we saw people analytics is actually the most impactful practices of all. So you see that at level 4 employee experience maturity, we call that equitable growth, where every employee can do their best work and be their best. People analytics is actually the most impactful practice. And we showed that statistically with driver analysis and correlation analysis, that when you get the people data in and give it into the hands of the people that can take action on it, everything gets a lot better. But most companies are actually not all that great at it. So 83% of people, of organizations, I should say, actually don't use people analytics to their full effect. And the downside of it is that your innovation suffers, your business outcome suffers. You see all these statistics here where people don't feel it's a great place to work if you don't listen to them. You have less innovation, you have less engagement and retention of people, and also less good business outcomes as well. So it's really, really important to democratize people data, and because it comes from different areas. And I'll just have a little heat map here as well, a little chart here. It just shows some of the areas where your people data can come from. And people data can not just come from, of course, your HR systems. It can also come from maybe your location system, right? Or your workplace management system, or your facilities system, or your sales management system as well. And how you connect all of these pieces together and give it to the right people is really, really important. Your customers of your people analytics are not just your people analytics team. It used to be that you just thought about, if you have a people analytics team, they are the customer of your people analytics, your people data insights. And of course, they are usually pretty analytically savvy, and their impact is more organizationally oriented for the entire organization. But when you think about it, your HR business partners, your HR team also needs all of these insights to share and take action on their customer groups and support their customer groups that they support as a business partner, in a consulting way. And their impact is more organizationally or team oriented depending on who they support. So if you have the HR business partner, for example, for your finance team, they probably want to know all of the insights that you can share on your finance team. And if you have the HR business partner who supports a specific location team, of course, they want to know all these insights and how they can take action on it and support their executives to take action on it. And usually they're not that analytically savvy. So how can you give them the insights in a way that's easy to action, visual, open, transparent, action-oriented? We'll talk a little bit more about those criteria as well. Usually the systems that they use are different too. And we'll talk a little bit about how systems like ChartHub can actually help with democratizing that people data. And as you go to other people analytics customers, finance, for example, Julie has a great example of how the finance team can actually consume people data. So I won't share too much on that, but your finance team needs also insights on people data, right? And so, for example, for workforce planning purposes, usually that's driven by finance. How can your finance team action on people data? Usually there might not be, some of these groups might not that analytically savvy, especially on people data. And people data is also different to any other data because there's different security requirements, of course, when you think about your people data versus your maybe supply chain data, right? People are not parts. So you have to think about other dimensions of privacy and security and ethics and all of that for people data. And then, of course, your executives also want to know about your people data insights, whether they want to know about your insights on employee surveys or just how many employees you have in every location, or maybe diversity insights on different geographies, different business groups. All of those insights are really important for your executives. And usually they're not really interested in diving into like analytical tools. They want the insights in a visual way, in a way that they can consume and drive action. And then, of course, as you go further down, you scale, like I really envision this as a pyramid. Your managers, every line manager needs a lot of different insights on their team members, whether that's, again, diversity insights, employee survey insights, health and well-being insights, or who's starting, who do I have as new members onboarding, or how many new team members do I even have? And Julie shared some really interesting insights with me that we'll talk a little bit about later on. And then what do your employees need? Do your employees need access to know about their colleagues? I talked about location data, what team they work on, how they should engage with people. Even some organizations we talked with, they even let people see, for example, the Myers-Briggs kind of profile of their employees for everybody else, because they use that at Deloitte. We used a different way of thinking about we called that like there were 4 different types too, and we shared that also on our email addresses. So all of these insights might be interesting for your employees and help them engage better, collaborate better, and eventually be more productive and have a better work experience. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about democratizing people data. We identified, as we talked with various different companies and looked at all of the different insights that we got from companies like 1Password and others, what we call the 4 keys for democratizing people data. Because one way to think about democratizing people data, when you think about audiences that are not maybe that analytically savvy, that are very busy, they can't dive deeper, it needs to be very simple, it needs to be very visual, it needs to tell people either in maybe a map or in an org chart what they need to see, not just in a list. It's very different if you see results in a list than when you see them in a visual chart, for example, in an org chart, on a map, for example. Very different experience, because it really draws your eye into that where you need to take action. So simple and visual is really important. How can you make it open and transparent, but yet secure? So can you bring in different insights from different platforms into one system? Because people don't want to go into all these different systems to see what they need to see about their people, right? A manager doesn't want to go into your employee survey system to access their employee survey reports, and then into maybe your HRS system to see diversity reports, because they also want to do crosstabs, right? They want to see, well, is one one employee group, for example, how engaged are my employees, for example, that have been with the company for more than 2 years compared to those that have only been here for half a year? Or people in a certain location more engaged, or do they have productivity challenges, or how are the sales components factoring into all of that? So bringing all of these insights into one place in an open, transparent system is really key for that too. Then action oriented. So can the insights really drive action? Because in a way, all the insights are not really worth a lot if nothing happens with them, right? I think the worst thing you can do in people analytics and listening is ask a question that you're not prepared to take action on, or like look into data, but then find out something that you don't want to take action on. So driving action is really important, and telling people what they need to do with this information, how they need to action that. And then real time, very, very important. We talked about before how the people data is shifting all the time, right? Where people work, how they work, what job they're in, what team they work on, what they want to do with their career, where they want to go, how mobile they are. All of this changes really constantly. And having a system that's really updating real time all the time, and just give you the information that's not like a month old, or even just like a day old, but real time refreshing, very, very important, because some of these things, again, change constantly. If you think about locations, for example, or remote work versus hybrid work versus in-office work, all of these insights need to be updated constantly. Here's a chart that we have from ChartHop, for example, and if you want to learn more about ChartHop, figure it out. It's a really interesting and very engaging, and I think modern system to bring these insights to managers and employees, and of course people analytics too, but bring them into the hands of those people that actually can take action on it in a very visual way, in a very real-time way, and in a way that people think about it. Because if you think, for example, this org chart view that we see here, this is the way that people want to know the information. I don't want to see people in a big list and then say, oh my God, now I got to go to another system that's an org charting system that I can now look into where people work. And then I need to go into another system where I want to see like where people are physically located. All of these areas need to come together in one system that's updated like all the time. So with that, Julie, I want to hear from you. I shared a lot. And tell us a little bit more about 1Password and who you are as a company and who your employees are, and all of that good stuff.
Oh, you bet. Thanks, Kathi. Just also, you mentioned two of my favorite tools. I am an ENFJ on Myers-Briggs, okay. And on Insights, I tend to be very orange. I'm a combination of red and yellow. And so if you use Insights, awesome. That's where I land.
Yes.
And awesome. on StrengthsFinder's a collaborator.
All right. So. I'm an ENTP.
There you go. So,
cool. Well,
yeah. So 1Password, we're a company of about 900 folks over 4 geographies: Canada, the US, the Netherlands, and the UK. And I probably get this story just a little bit wrong, but I like to say that it took us a little over 10 years to go from 0 to 200. And then it took us about 10 months to go from 200 to 400 in 2020. And then now here in the fall of 2022, right at that 900 mark. And so the bulk of our growth has taken place throughout the pandemic, being fully distributed. Yep. In fact, up until July of this year, I had not met another 1Password employee in real life. So it took until then, and I got hired in September of 2020. And so what sometimes that's hard to get your brain around to develop those types of relationships and leadership throughout a company. And so using tools like the data tools and using tools like ChartHop help bring that world closer together, right? That we use that information and insights to help understand who our employees are, what they need, how they work, where they work, what time they work. All of that information is all around us every day. So when I think about that one slide about employee data and really needing to understand who our folks are, that becomes so critical for a fully distributed company. And so finding ways to understand, synthesize, and then utilize and put into action that information is really critical to not just my success, but the success of employees who do their work every day. And that's something I get pretty excited about thinking about.
And that's fantastic. When I heard about the growth, that's like almost mind-boggling. So tell us more about how that worked. What were the challenges, and how did people data factor into like supporting that growth?
Oh gosh. I think that some of the challenges were just that speed of being able to very quickly get systems scaling fast enough to get them tools to people, information to folks fast enough, especially throughout creating the entities in the US, the UK, and the Netherlands, like I mentioned, all while keeping things secure. So in the same level of security that we deliver to our customers through 1Password, we deliver to our employees. And so every tool has to go through that type of security rubric and thoughtfulness around it. So as we think about data, we're very protective of our employees' privacy. And so we ask for that information, we don't require it. And so finding ways to enable that information has been just, for me, it's been a really thoughtful exercise. And in terms of what it may be in other companies, it's very standard to get all the demographic information about your employees up front. That's not true here. And so we work really hard to earn that trust and to keep that trust that we keep our employees' information safe and secure.
Yeah, I mean, security, of course, and data privacy is kind of part of who you are as a company,
yes.
right? So
yes,
of course,
sure.
that's really ingrained in what you do. And I think for people, analytical people, data overall, that's super critical, because I talked about the importance of trust, of course, in leadership in the organization. I think it's very easy to lose the trust of your employees very quickly if you like don't tell them your data is confidential, and then it's not confidential, or it's not secure, right? Somebody sees something that's not supposed to be seen. So
yeah,
I
and
think that's really
you
critical.
mentioned that 83% of companies are underutilizing or not utilizing people analytics. And
yes,
gosh, I don't know how I could be successful without Lisa Chen, who's our people analytics specialist, and she helped me talk through this presentation, as well as just understanding those insights. And I would really recommend, as folks think about scaling their people team, that become an early ad, and that once the ops piece is settled and your recruiting piece is settled, your business partners come on play, that analytics role brings everything together. And I would encourage that earlier in a scale than later. I think it needs to move from a nice to have to a need to have role, so that folks get that insight, that we can think about where do we want to expand, where, for folks who are exploring hybrid, where are your people? Where do they live? Where might it make sense to put a physical location somewhere? I think that role ties all of that. Got that slide with all of the tools we use every day. It was a little overwhelming to admit,
right.
but that someone or a team that can bring that information and synthesize it and relay it in really usable ways is a really critical for companies to then scale to where they want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you can't really make any decisions like how can you make decisions without data, right? I mean, if you think about, for example, one of the data points that you shared with me, I'd love to hear a little bit more. Tell us how long employees on average are along in their tenure at 1Password. That kind of surprised me a lot.
Yeah, it was really true. When we started earlier this summer, working with our people analytics team and really starting to build that function and that muscle out, we discovered early, I would say about June of this year, that 40% of the company had been with 1Password for 6 months or less. And that was kind of an aha moment for us for a lot of reasons, right? Around engagement. So engagement tends to be high when people are new, but then it can drop off really quick if you don't build underneath that the support, the education, the tools that people need to be successful. It can also really help us understand that we may not be hitting some certain goals because folks are still ramping up. And so did we leave enough room for sales to ramp, for engineering to ramp, to get to high performance? and taking a minute to really reflect on that and to understand that we need to meet people where they are. And if 40% of the company is pretty new, then making sure that we're addressing that there's a real challenge there to address, and making sure that we're delivering programs that are geared towards a relatively new org, and not one, even though in our minds we're a 15-year-old company, really we're a 6-month-old company if that's the bulk of the employees are that new.
Wow. And I mean, I'd be curious, was that a surprise to your leadership team and to you? Of course, it was surprising. It sounded very surprising to me for a 15-year-old company.
Yeah, I
like
think
40% are like.
I think it was one of those situations where data helps really laser focus an idea. It's one thing to know that, oh my gosh, yes, oh, we're hiring, there's about 10 people a week going through onboarding. IT is ordering, equipment at a rapid rate. You know it in the back of your head, but when you see it that clearly and you're trying to understand why things may not be as running as smoothly, or why people are like kind of operating up here, like if burnout is impacting 90% of HR folks around the globe, well, maybe it's because we're bringing on this many people in such a short time. And so I think it helps just laser focus what everyone's feeling. It puts data and information into context and into an idea that you can understand then what's happening, as opposed to it just being a feeling. It becomes a fact.
I think that's so key, because it probably also helped you, I would imagine, when you made decisions about different programs that you wanted to, or projects that you wanted to provide to people, right? So if you were thinking about training programs or leadership development or anything else, really, it probably helped you with making those decisions. Because if you have in your back of your mind, we're a 15-year-old company, probably most people are like 5 years longer, 40% are less than 6 months. That's kind of,
exactly. And to think through that, what does that need, and then what do our next 6 months look like, and how do we bring on those programs and make sure that we get everyone caught up so that we can move forward together.
And the expectations, of course, of your people, as you mentioned too, have to be different, right? Because you can't expect somebody to hit the ground running. I mean, usually it takes
a bit to ramp and to make sure that everyone's in play, and to understand, like you said, about the programs or budgeting decisions, or how we're going to do to deliver that experience that we're looking for.
No, absolutely. I love that. I love that that surprising fact that I think many companies might not know. So if you think about now, how long is your company? Like, do you have that kind of issue as well? And I think a lot of companies that are growing really quickly, it's a struggle, right?
It can be, yes, it can really be. And to make sure, and especially I think the challenge, even though we've been at home for 2 years with the pandemic, companies that are on purpose, fully distributed, also face that challenge of, that's a lot of people to integrate, and a lot of people to make sure that we catch them up on culture, on inside jokes, on references to certain things. And I think that, again, being fully distributed, you have to really take an extra step to make sure that you bring those folks along with you, because it's easy not to, and it's easy. And so it's my focus to make sure that we get that information out, and we do just that, bring people along.
I think you need to be much more intentional on this, right? If you're fully distributed, because it just doesn't just happen, right? It can't be just by serendipity or something like that.
So, Kathi, my favorite stolen quote about that is that we need to make the implicit explicit when you're fully distributed, and using data and tools like that help bring that to life, really able to show and highlight in a real and tangible way what's happening, and make that explicit.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to pivot a little bit and hear your story about how you worked with finance and getting them that data. Tell us more about that, because I think it's a problem, an opportunity that most companies have as well. So tell us more about that.
So when I was working with Lisa to prep for our conversation, we were talking about that idea of democratization, and what did that mean, and how do we share with the right people the information that we have, and that potentially traditionally folks have siloed that information, or have only held it at certain levels, as opposed to really helping everyone, like your chart with, maybe where the level of interest or sophistication is in analytics. And as most of you, I think, are going through, we're budgeting for next year, and we're thinking about the tools and the systems and the vendors that we work with. And we have been working with a team on an outside vendor on helping create a more diverse candidate pool. And when it came time to think about the renewal, we, finance is like, hey, is this a tool that we still want to value? Well, when we did the initial evaluation, we hadn't been collecting diversity information about our candidates. And now we have that. And so we were able to help determine whether or not that was a tool that was serving us well, or serving what we needed them to do. And with our talent lens on, the answer was probably not, that it wasn't quite what we were expecting. And if we had made that decision to turn it off, that we would have just told our stakeholders and moved on. However, because we were able to share that information more broadly and share it with finance, with brand, with marketing, we learned that relationship may have a deeper impact on our employee brand, on reaching other people, on, we found out that we're sponsoring one of their conferences. And so if we had just ended that relationship based on just the one lens, we might have had a really negative downstream impact. So when I think about how do we share, why it's important to share and to democratize that data to really get it across to a lot of users, it helps us make a much better business decision in the end. And so maintaining that partnership, while maybe not as a primary talent tool, it provides a lot of other value for 1Password, for their users, for our potential candidates. And so we chose to maintain that relationship. And so that to me was a really kind of an aha moment about, okay, I think we do a lot of these things naturally, and now we're putting some language around what and why we do it.
Yeah, wow, I love that story, because it seems like the business case is not one-dimensional, right? The ROI is not just like, oh, the ROI would be diverse candidates, and we didn't get that ROI, so we turned it off. But wait a minute, there's other things.
There's other factors to think about.
There's other factors, and when you bring them all together, and then finance said, well, actually, we had better financial performance on those areas, because maybe customers were also going to you more so because you had a better reputation as a like admired brand or something like that, right? So like the multidimensional nature of all of those areas, I think is really what this example is about. So,
and I think anytime, I love it too. And I think through that, some of with our other perhaps programs or benefits that we offer, things like, we may offer an amazing fertility benefit that very, very few people will actually be able to take advantage of in a company. But the majority of the company can be proud and excited that we support colleagues in that way. And so learning that through survey, through, specific benefit survey, or through the employee engagement survey helps inform those decisions on moving forward with those programs. Yeah.
So you get just more informed decisions, right? Better informed decisions, because the data is not like one-dimensional, it's really multidimensional, because people are multidimensional and the business is multidimensional, right? So,
exactly. And that while data can inform, we need all those other voices in the room to provide that context to help make decisions and to help move forward.
That's great. So we talked about finance as one example. Tell us a little bit how employees maybe see employee data of other employees.
Yeah. So as I mentioned,
do they use it for?
As I mentioned earlier, it's an opt-in program, and this is where my I Heart Chart Hub comes in. I think it's so great to be able to use even the just if you were just using Chart Hubs or Chart alone, that wealth of information helps create community within an org. It helps people understand where their colleagues sit, what they might be interested in, what people are willing to share in the tool can help build that. If I'm looking for, I sit in Portland, Oregon. If I wanted to bring everyone together who is within the town or the city, I can easily sort that way and see a visualization, a map of who that might be, and then reach out. One thing I was telling Kathi, when I used to sit in an office, it would be really easy to get my head into the org chart. I could see the engineers sitting together. I knew that the compensation team ate lunch together, that sales, they were the rowdy guys on the floor, banging the gong when they got a sale. And so I think that it made it easier to when you see it. And one thing that I really appreciate about the org chart here is if I knew someone, if I only know that, maybe I only know their first name, I can search quickly and see all the people with that name and find out who they are, where they work, what they do. Maybe I only know the team of people. I can search ChartHop with that team name and see everyone on that team and then find the person that I'm looking for. And when I think about helping employees do that, it really is about creating those connections. And so whether it be through ChartHop, whether it be through other tools that you mentioned, helping them get access to that information is really it helps build that community in a way that I think being distributed, there's already a challenge to that. So we need tools that help us build there.
Yeah, I think what resonates for me on this one is, as you are fully distributed by design, right? It would be easy if you would just like walk over to somebody. If you're a small company, you could just walk over. If a large company, maybe you just like, I don't know, call somebody up on the phone or something. But as you're fully distributed, there's already less information, less connection, because you hadn't met anybody and it's not easy to meet them, right? And so then you can see which team they're sitting in, who they're working with, who they're reporting to, who are their teammates, what projects they're working on, what time zone they're in too, right? Because you'll see the location, so it can help you just be respectful of time zones, right? And maybe not ping them when it's like already 8 p.m. that time, because maybe you're a different time zone, right? So and you have colleagues in the UK too, so that's like a lot of different time zones, obviously, and just being respectful of where people are located time zone wise and their cultural environment too. I think it helps with all of that, right?
Oh my gosh, exactly. And I love how even, kind of what our day-to-day tools that have become, Slack or Teams, Zoom, that you can share more of yourself through those tools these days, right? Pronouns, time zones, other interests. Really, I find it really interesting that those tools have added a lot of that, like, tell us more about yourself, because if that's where most of our work is happening these days, then that's where you can see that information about someone, and they might have a picture on their icon, their avatars with their dog or with their kiddos, and you can learn more in a very easy way, and then help understand and make those connections.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, because I think it also goes to the individualization of every person, right? Because we're not just a job that we do, we're like people in our own rights, right? We have families or dogs or cats or like anything else, and hobbies and pronouns and just respecting that and knowing about this and connecting with people who might have similar interests, for example. Like it's always a good conversation starter too, right? If you see a picture of a dog and it's like, oh, I love your dog, it's so cute, or something like that, it's a good way of thinking about it and connecting with that. So your employees use look at the ChartHop probably in a lot of times, right? So they look at the directory probably a lot. Do you tell them in your onboarding as well that it's there and that they know how to use it?
And we invite them to share as much of information as they'd like on their profiles, so that, again, we can make those interesting connections. And as our diversity and inclusion efforts continue to ramp, we want to be able to know who associates or who identifies in certain ways, even something as silly, not silly, maybe it's not silly to them, but dog owners or cat owners, right? We want to be able to bring people together in smaller groups, and knowing that and having them, that employees sharing with us that information helps us tie folks together in a way, or know that there, like I said earlier, some benefits that we might want to bring on, or different types of programs. It really helps to have that full picture of an employee, and not just this, what we see on screen all day, but knowing what happens when we walk away from our computer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the pandemic really has shifted that notion, because I remember like before the pandemic, we were on video calls too, but it was
Yeah.
unacceptable that you had a kid walk through or something
Right.
because I'm like, oh my God, you can't have anybody. And now we're really like, it's part of life, right?
Yeah.
So like being more like, there's a whole person to it. It's not just the work person, right? We have kids or dogs or whatever, cats. I have cats. I don't think they've walked through yet. They're usually quiet, but and I think just building that community and connection and helping people feel included and be part of something bigger than just their work is, I think, really
Exactly.
important. Yeah. Like I know we probably have only a couple of minutes before we move over to questions, but tell us a little bit about an example how you're democratizing people data to managers, like anything that you can think of there.
So we recently spun up the HR business partner dashboard that the team can, the business partners can sit with leaders in the org to review all of the things, whether it be attrition, whether it be current headcount, makeup of that team, where people have, where we're seeing any movement, those types of, that type of crystallization of information has proven to be really successful because of our rapid growth. Sometimes it's hard, even as the leader of the function, to say like, oh my gosh, we now have 125 people. Like, wow, how did that happen? And it's it's one thing to put it on paper in your budget. Yep, we want this much headcount. It's another to be like, oh my gosh, we now have this many people in the org. Are they aligned to the right work? Are they doing the right thing? Are we checking in with them in the right ways? And so having that dashboard in a way that is usable, it's they don't have to log into another system to get it, that the business partner sits with them and goes through that information is really important. And while at 1Password we've had the luxury, the blessing of not having high attrition, that information becomes really important to understand, how people are doing, how people are thinking about themselves, their career, where we can operate differently for folks. All of that information comes together to really help define the employee experience and making sure it lines up with what we wanted the experience to be. And so when I think about with the managers, helping them understand their team in a different way, perhaps, or solidifying what they think about their team into that facts so they can balance the data with their context and manage their teams better. That to me feels like that magic that we're going for with helping data and context come together to drive results, to drive engagement, and to make sure that we're doing what we say we do with what we want to deliver.
Yeah, and I think just empowering managers with these insights and bringing them these insights in a very digestible way, because I mean, managers are busy. Like usually they are not just managers.
Right.
Most managers are also working managers, right? They need to not just manage teams, they also have their own accountabilities that they have to do. And so that coach player kind of notion, I think, is in most companies, right? Probably in yours too. And so how do you make it very easy for them to know what they need to know and not have to hunt and peck for this? And I think that visual representation and just driving action and getting these insights in a way that are consumable and inform the right action is really kind of priceless and inspires trust in the company too, right? Because if managers really care about that and people see they do take action on what they learn, they'll want to give you more information about themselves, not less.
Exactly. And I think for helping managers, I love that slide about that technology spectrum, that managers don't have time and they may not have the aptitude or interest in just taking the raw data in an Excel spreadsheet and then sorting and figuring it out, and that mistakes can't get made, and zooming, shooting decks all across the company isn't the best use of anyone's time or energy. So really being able to synthesize that in a way through the people analytics team to get the information in that visualization way. I just can't stress enough how important that is.
Like a picture says more than 1,000 words, right? If you try to just send them a lot of data points and they're like, I don't know how to look at this, but if you say, well, here's a visual of this, like maybe you have now 90% of your people are now in the UK and they might not even have realized that, right? For example, like, oh my God, maybe we need to do something to cater to those kind of, whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
Any of these insights, like when you see it in a visual way, it's very different than just knowing it and being able to find it.
Yeah, we have a great example of that coming up. Friday is a holiday for us, for our Canadian employees. And yeah, okay, that's great. Well, our Canadian employees are now 3/4 of our employee base.
Oh,
So
wow.
who's covering while they're off, right? And knowing those types
Oh,
of
yeah.
those information is really helpful for our business to make sure that we maintain continuity, that we understand that our teams are going to be off. So what do we need to do to cover? And it can be as simple as those types of questions to ask and to get the information out of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you shared with me too about like weather impact. I know there's a
Yeah,
big hurricane now in Florida, right?
Florida,
And
yeah,
just knowing, is there anybody impacted
yeah.
and how
Who,
can we support them?
yeah,
I think
being able
it's,
to very easily understand who might be in the path of harms of nature's harm and connect with them, make sure that they have what they need, make sure that they know how to connect back with us. It's those day-to-day things that I don't think we always tag it as data or democratization, but that's exactly what it is. That's how we get that information out.
that's exactly what it is. Yeah, no. So maybe we're using a big
We
word.
use this big fancy word for something we're already doing.
You're doing all of that, right? I know when we talked about it, he was like, "Oh my God, I don't even know what that means." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what it means. What you're doing
You're like,
in
oh,
all these different places." That's what we mean by that. And maybe it's a fancy word for something, but I think many organizations are struggling with that because there's so much data. It used to be there was not enough data, and you kind of couldn't know where to have it. And I think now it's more like there's so many data points.
yeah,
How do we bring them to people in a digestible and action oriented and visual way, and secure it and all of those
exactly.
kind of points? So
And
it's
people want to know what their impact is. They want to know what they can do to make a difference,
yeah,
and that's how you share with that information.
that's fantastic. What else should I ask you? Maybe any like words of advice for anybody who wants to start with democratizing people data? Like,
Yeah,
what would you suggest people to do or not to do?
yeah. I think early and often to not be scared of it. To not. My boss calls it share your Legos. Make sure you don't want to hoard don't or hoard information. Sharing it, getting it in the right context for the right audience is important. But I think the more people know, the more they buy in to their work. People want to make an impact. They want to understand how what they're doing feeds into the broader picture, the value you're adding to your customers. And by sharing that information in real tangible ways helps to drive that engagement and helps to drive that success and helps just it just becomes that virtuous cycle. And the more you know, right, the more you share, the more you'll get back.
Yeah, no, I think it's so true because if people see that something is happening with the data that they did share, right? But voluntarily, of course, and they're like, "Oh my God, I shared this, and something is positive is
Something,
actually happening. I want to
yep,
give more," right? The worst
exactly.
thing you can do is like ask for something and not do anything about it, right? And like, better not ask if you're not interested to take
Yeah.
action on it. Yeah,
And
better
if
off
I
not
think,
asking.
one thought for me was like, sometimes this
Yeah,
feels really big, and it can be as easy as taking a survey, whether it be a full
yeah,
engagement survey, or it's, hey, we just released a program and we're going to ask a couple questions. What worked, what didn't, what do we need to know for next time? And
yeah.
then sharing those results back. Closing that loop can be, this is where you might start. If that's where you are, start there and then build up to dashboards and full analytics feedback. But you're probably already doing some of this stuff. So just label it, make the implicit explicit as you move through sharing data and helping people understand how they connect to the bigger picture.
I love that. Yeah. So closing the loop is really the first step, right? We heard you. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're not gonna do, right? That kind of thing. Because otherwise, people say, "Oh, I completed a survey. I don't know anybody heard me. Anybody
Yep.
paid attention, or I provided this feedback." I think it's people understand that you can't do everything, right? They
Right.
suggest many things, and sometimes you can't do some things you can do. But just telling people, "We heard you. We appreciate your feedback. Here's where we go next." That kind of thing
Yep.
is very, very important. Sometimes we forget that. Even sometimes I've heard this too a lot of times when people say, "Well, we did all these initiatives based on a survey feedback, but we forgot to tell people it was based on the survey," right? So we did all these things and people said, I have no idea where this came from. Like, oh, it was you, right? You told us that. Just telling people, because they don't know unless you tell them over and over again, by the way. Just telling them once is not enough, because maybe they didn't read the email, maybe they didn't pay attention, maybe it didn't sink in. So I think oversharing, telling them what you're going to tell them, telling them what you told them, that kind of thing, very important too. So I think sounding like a broken record might be a good thing on that. We have a great question before we close off on how data analytics is shared through storytelling. Julie, do you have anything there that you could share?
Oh gosh. Wow. I think, so I'll use the survey. And this is a few companies ago, but things like really tying that information or the change back to what you did, and using an example, as silly as this one feels silly to me, but we were in a co-located office, and the biggest piece of feedback was about the coffee, and that the coffee wasn't right. And that it was so fun. It was funny to get the survey results back, and that like being the big thing that was impeding people's ability to work. And when we dug a little deeper, at first it was like, oh, so, we need this brand rather than this brand. But what we found out was that because people didn't care for the coffee being served, they would then go out and take, a half an hour, 45 minutes to go get coffee that they liked and come back into the office. And hey, I am all for taking a coffee walk. I want people to get their fresh air and get that out. But if that's happening every day, team after team, and it's a problem we could solve by bringing in a better experience in the cafeteria that we already wanted to be a lovely place for people, then we could help them have that experience and maybe get onto their day and leave those and let them go for a walk when it was their one-on-one, or when they had, when it fit better in their day, rather than like getting to work, finding out that this is a bummer. And we learned all of that through the survey, and then being able to share that back in a fun, through storytelling, using, a visual, and we did a fun skit at an all hands to help bring that back to life. It really jumped out at me when you said that question. That was the first thing that I thought of.
I love that. I love that story. I'm going to remember that story now, of that storytelling story. So thank you so much, Julie. I think we're out of time, and thank you everybody for your questions. And I think we answered most of them through our conversation, but yeah, thanks for joining us. And thank you so much, Julie, for
my pleasure. Thank you so much. And if we didn't get to something, get to something and someone wants to hit me up, please go ahead. Everything's on LinkedIn. You can get a hold of me pretty quickly.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Cheers.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.